Welcome to the Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. As always, I'm your host, Jack, and today I'm talking all the way across the pond, and really all the way across my country and then the pond, because I'm talking to Chris and Lindsey of Behind the Box. How you doing, Chris? How you doing, Lindsey?
Hi.
Yeah, we're
Good.
great. We're wonderful. It's a pleasure to be here. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's early in the morning for me. It's in the afternoon for you. And also, I'm realizing I'm not used to addressing two people at the same time on the podcast. And so I'm asking, how you doing, Chris? How you doing, Lindsey? As if I'm like turning from one to another, but I don't even have any sort of context for what the usual hosting gig is for this. I'm usually with either a large group or one single person. So we're off to
We
a
like
good
to
start.
challenge you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm so glad that we could put this together. In a way, we've been kind of like internet homies since we've both been doing a lot of video work, and we're some of the scrubs trying to make our way up on Reddit and on YouTube and Board Game Geek and that kind of stuff. And, you know, I really admire a lot of your work, and I've been wanting to pick your brain about, like, what are your guys' techniques and approaches and all that kind of stuff. But in general, you're just fascinating, charming people that I was like, I want to hang out with them. And I think that's a lot of your oeuvre and appeal.
Oh, that's very nice to
That's
say.
very
Thank you.
sweet.
Yeah, we've had that as well. Like you said, you know, we've been sort of climbing up in Reddit and Board Game Geek and YouTube, sort of around about the same time as yourself. And sort of last October and November was, I think, our first video. And we've had that same feeling, you know, with not only with you, but there's been a couple of other creators as well where we just look at them and go, yeah, they're the people we want to hang out with, playing games with and spending time with. So
Yeah, I am a big fan of Cardboard Herald, so I'm a little starstruck to be sat
Lindsey
here.
was freaking out. Before this happened, about 10 minutes before you called, she was like rocking back and forth in a chair, and she was like, I am so nervous.
My hands are so sweaty
She was
right
like,
now. You can't see it.
we're meeting a celebrity.
Finally, I know what David Bowie felt like. Okay, well, I think that the best place to start, the obvious place to start for me is, how did you two meet? Like, what's your guys' background? That's going to give me so much more context as to everything else that's worth asking you guys.
That's a good question. So I went to university in my home state of Michigan, and I studied abroad at a university in England.
And that was in 2007.
Yes. And Chris happened to also be at that same uni, and we were in the same dormitory, and that's how we met.
Yeah, well, I got placed. Basically, I got sort of a late dormitory admission, and the only spaces left were in the halls where they had all the international students. And so there was me, and then a whole hall just full of American people. That was really interesting. And, Lindsey
Chris doesn't belong with us. Let's just tuck him away over there with the Yanks.
Yeah.
So me and Lindsey and all these other American people all hung out all the time. And then Lindsey and I got really close. And we did long distance then for
3 years.
About 3 years.
Yeah.
And then we got married in 2010.
Yeah, and then I moved over here, and then you went back to university to study something else, and we were in a different town, and now we've just moved to this town now. So, yeah, it's been an adventure.
Yeah, it's been about 10-year adventure. So,
What were you studying that you went overseas, abroad to study, Lindsey?
So I was doing this is so, it's so embarrassing. I started out on like a theater scholarship. So I did like a theater degree for 2 years. And I went over to study some like stage things and theater things, and I actually changed majors when I came back and finished off the last 2 years on a completely different degree program in biology. It's a wonder that I actually finished on time.
it's also a complete shift.
I know.
Yeah, no
But it's
kidding.
because I took a class at the university in England, an ecology class, and I loved it so much. It just shifted everything for me, and so I did biology instead. And yeah, that was what I was doing.
Is biology your field of work now?
No, I had a really hard time finding work going abroad as a foreigner to a new land and having no connections whatsoever. So the only work I could find was in like a call center. So I did call center work for a while, and I was able to get into like quality analyst role. So you listen to how well the call is going and grade it, so to speak, and compliance. And now I work for like a hearing aid company, and I listen to all the calls that all of the clinical case managers and stuff have with the patients.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's awesome.
It's an interesting career trajectory.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. There's a lot of learning involved in a shift like that, but yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, well, I'm fascinated with like any sort of accessibility thing. So that's working for a hearing aid company, and that sounds fascinating. And as far as the like not being able to find biology work, that's something I'm also very familiar with by being in Southeast Alaska. University of Alaska Southeast has a somewhat renowned marine biology program, and I've had a lot of friends who actually get a marine biology degree, and then it turns out that there's so many marine biologists that there are no marine biology jobs available unless you're willing to hop onto a boat and go out to the Arctic for, I don't know, a couple months at a time doing survey work. And not everyone is up to the kind of solitude that it takes to do that. So that's a familiar story to me. And in particular, one of my friends, Leslie, she is like the one who was willing to crush it and go out to sea for months at a time in solitude and listen to tons of podcasts and just go watching whales, I guess. But what about you, Chris? What were you doing in uni at the time? I'm so not used to calling it uni. It's college, okay? It's college.
Yeah, so I initially, when Lindsey and I met, I was doing business studies, because that's what I did all through like the later years of high school and what we call college in England. And I really didn't enjoy it, and so I ended up leaving, and for a while I was actually working as a manager at the McDonald's that I used to work at when I was like 16, and I did that for about a year while we were doing long distance. We then got married, came back, we moved to a place called Huddersfield, and I started going back to university again, and I did computer games design.
Ooh.
And yeah, so I was there for a while, finished doing that, did a couple of expos, went to places and actually demonstrated games that I'd been working on with teams, or there was one I did where I worked on my own, so I was trying to get into that sort of scene of doing like indie game development. So I made a couple of things, showed them at a few different expos. That went over really well. I was able to get a couple of contracting works for games design, so I did that for a little bit, but then that wasn't panning out enough to be viable as a financial income for us. So I started working in insurance at the same company that Lindsey was doing quality control for, and so I did that then for about 18 months, and then Lindsey got this new job.
Okay. So there's no longer any nepotism involved because you're no longer in the same company.
Exactly, yeah. They were catching on, so we had to move on. We had to flee the town. But yeah, so Lindsey got this job here, and since then, I've actually just been looking for work and working on our YouTube stuff, so I'm trying to get back into more of the games design stuff, and just trying to find something to do, really.
It's been really nice though having you home working on the channel stuff, because you've been very dedicated to it, and I think Chris is like the main reason that we've grown. I honestly, if it were just me, we wouldn't be anywhere.
You really think if Chris were doing this on his own that you guys would have grown this much?
Well, I gotta give him most of the credit.
I think when it comes to the social media stuff, he
manages everything.
The Twitter stuff, because Lindsey does a lot of the editing, because even though we can both do it, and we often do it together, she's more particular about how it is laid out and where the B-roll goes.
I've got a very specific picture in my mind.
So if I make it, Lindsey will, like during a day off, not a day off, every day is a day off for me, but if I'm making a video and I edit it all together and Lindsey watches it, she changes a lot of the B-roll stuff especially, and so typically Lindsey does most of that. So to say it to me isn't true, because it's not as good. until you get involved. So
I don't know that I necessarily want to attribute this to something as domestic as like arranging a house, but I'm somewhat imagining myself in the kitchen, like putting some of the utensils away, and then silently my wife is rearranging them, putting them actually where they go. Because in 10 years of living in the same house, I still am not putting things away where they actually should be going, and I just kind of put them in a corner and say, yeah, it more or less looks okay over here.
It's in the kitchen.
Yeah, you got it in the right room.
The general vicinity.
That's basically it, yeah. If I do it, Lindsey makes it correct.
Well, that's awesome to hear that you guys are working as a team, and that has got to be incredibly useful to be able to rely on one another, especially if you're in a pinch for something. My own wife does a huge amount of work in order to help me, but most of it is between our jobs and our kid, as well as like some of the volunteer projects that we try to engage in. She's trying to give me as much time so that I can focus on this stuff, which is also, in a way, a huge amount of support. But you mentioned the video game design thing, and I want to know, again, for context, because I like knowing these things about people, because we're nerds, right? We like as much information as possible. So were there certain, like, touchstone video games that made a big impact on you that made you want to pursue that as a career in design? Like, was there one game that opened your eyes as a kid that you're like, oh, I don't just want to play video games, I want to make them?
Probably, well, yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was, I think, probably 5 years old, my dad got me a Sega Master System, which I think was the first Sega. It had the first ever Sonic built into the system.
Yep.
So that was a pretty huge one. I loved Sonic. I used to play that game endlessly. And then the big one for me is probably Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. It's like a classic answer for that, but I think there's a reason that it's a classic answer.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's an incredible game that completely changed the industry. And
yeah, it was insane. It was one of my most played games. I probably completed it more times than I remember, to like 100% completion, getting all of the heart containers, everything. That was what I used to do, was just be at home playing Legend of Zelda endlessly again, just nonstop.
I think you and I may have been the same person at a certain point. Like, I remember long before I even knew speed running video games was a thing, and it probably wasn't a thing at the time because the internet didn't have the prevalence of people putting video on it yet. But I can remember maybe a year or two after it coming out and being like, I'm going to complete this game in one day as fast as I can, and like sweating as I'm like going through, like, oh, I gotta get this, I gotta get the gems, oh no, I gotta go over to the Dodongo Cavern, oh man, I gotta rush over here, what if I bypass this, and like actually strategizing on the fly how I'm going to shave off minutes. I don't remember my final time. It's probably garbage compared to what people are actually doing these days, but I have a huge affection for that game as well. And I guess that brings me to, like, actual games, you know, real people games, adult games, as we so focus on, board games. Which of you were the board gamer prime in your lives, and how did you cross-pollinate to the other person?
Oh, that's an interesting journey. I would say it probably was me initially. Mm-hmm. Just because board games are how my family gets to know one another and spend time together. So any family gathering, or even just like a Wednesday evening, a board game comes out on the table, or a card game. You know, euchre was a big one growing up. And so that was prevalent in my family, but it was never the kind of modern board gaming. It was a lot of
Phase 10 and Balderdash and things like that.
Yeah. So things you would consider to be, well, a lot of people turn their nose up at them now. But so that's what I grew up on. But then when I moved abroad, and the games that I brought with me, they went down okay, but I never got the reception that they would have gotten in my family back home.
It's because I grew up, my mum and dad hated board games because their experience with them was Trivial Pursuit and Monopoly, and that's just argument makers. And so they always hated them. So I never really grew up knowing any other games existed. And so Lindsey comes over with games like Phase 10 and Boulder Dash and Taboo and just these funny things that I'd never experienced before. So I loved them. My friends enjoyed playing them with us, but my family pretty much refused to play because in their mind, Monopoly and Trivial Pursuit, we hate those, therefore we hate all board games.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was Lindsey that integrated the idea of, oh, board games are fun into my mind.
But then it was you that really brought us into modern gaming, I would say.
When I started university in Huddersfield, I made friends with people there, obviously you do when you go to school. One of them was super into modern board games, and he would bring them, and we'd play them after classes, and then there was a board game store in Huddersfield that we used to go to all the time. And so we started playing more and more games with them, and they were more modern games. So it started out with things like Avalon and Ticket to Ride, and then it just evolved into what is now like a wall of a collection for us.
That's how it happens. That seems to be a pretty familiar trajectory. But some of those classics are all right. I mean, you mentioned Boulder Dash. There's a few games like that. I mean, there's some replacements these days, but there's a place for it. And, you know, Chris, at least your parents' response had a little bit of knowledge to it. You know, tangentially, my dad always tolerated my brother and I playing games, you know, Hero Quest and Magic the Gathering and that kind of stuff. But when I was telling him, like, after I had moved to Juneau and I was starting to get more into, like, boxed board games instead of card games or CCGs and that kind of stuff, and I was like, yeah, I'm playing a lot of board games these days. I remember hearing him on the phone and he's like, what, you mean like Candyland? I was like, oh, dude, there's no way that you could have made me feel so small in this moment, and you have no idea that you did it. But since then, he's become a very big fan of the Cardboard Herald, and it's like, oh, yeah, you're like professional over here. You know, you got a great sounding podcast, Jack. You're just like Mark Maron. I'm like, hold off for a second there, Pops. You know, we'll leave Mark Maron to his thing for a while. But
it is interesting though, because my family now are much more into games. Like my mum actually has her own collection of board games. My brother does. My dad, he plays them. He doesn't own any, but
he tolerates board games. He's very accepting of the passion in others, but
yeah. And if there's games that he thinks he'll be really good at, then he loves those games. So he really likes poker, and so he thinks he's amazing at
he fancies himself.
Thinks he's really good at Skull, and he never wins any of those games. But he will always be up for playing those types of games where he feels like he can like out-mind game other people and read the situation.
I totally know those kind of people.
Do you ever get your dad to the table?
I have got him to play one game, Forbidden Island. That was it. And it was because, like, all right, it's a weird thing. Growing up, my dad was into sci-fi, during my time growing up. He was into sci-fi, but real hard-boiled stuff. He didn't really like when it verged on fantasy. Like, Star Wars was good until they started talking about the Force a little too much, you know? He wanted the Han Solo side of things.
Yeah.
And no tolerance of fantasy. He would never watch Lord of the Rings or anything like that with me. And I was, of course, like a huge fantasy geek. And I never really imagined him really having like a playful imagination. And this is a very, very weird path to travel. But he became obsessed with his dog, which was a pug, after myself and my brother had moved out and my little sister was spending more time away from home. And he had this pug, and it was like his additional child that he got to fawn over as a single dude. And one Christmas, I think, my wife and I got him a like Etsy framed print that was Steam Pug instead of steampunk. And it was this pug that had like a zeppelin attached to it and had goggles on. And I didn't think my dad would know anything about steampunk. And I was like, okay, well, you know, this is just something silly. And it kind of matches what he thinks of his son and daughter-in-law, and he loves us very much, even if he can't relate to us on a lot of things. And so I get him this, and he's like, Steampug? I was like, yeah, it's a play on steampunk. And he's like, what's steampunk? This is just Jules Verne. And I was like, what yeah, like, what do you mean it's like Jules Verne? And he's like, well, I was obsessed with Jules Verne as a kid, and like just all the adventures of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and just all kinds of adventure pulp novels. And I was like, what are you talking about? That isn't my dad to be into all this stuff. And since then, he started getting like steampunk coffee table books and like looking at cosplay online and all kinds of stuff like that. And not that he's actively cosplaying or anything, but I was able to kind of jockey that kind of affinity into, hey, this Forbidden Island game, it's like Indiana Jones with the barest hint of steampunk elements. So if you can get through this with me, I think you'll have a good time. And it's cooperative, so you don't have to feel like you're doing something that is going to make you look dumb, because we're all in it together. And I got him to play Forbidden Island when he was visiting one time. So that's my story of playing a board game for the first time in my life as an adult with my dad.
Wow, that's really good.
That's fantastic. So, tricking him into playing a game.
Yeah, exactly. That was a really long tangent to explain I played Forbidden Island with my dad, but it's a story worth immortalizing, at least in my head.
I agree.
So, at what point did you guys decide, you know what, we have too much free time and we have too much security in like who we are and what we feel confident about in life, so I'm going to go ahead and put ourselves out there on the internet and work tirelessly to create videos for people to judge us by?
Well, it was a long time coming, I think, because I used to do YouTube years and years ago in League of Legends. I used to have a League of Legends focused channel.
You were a League of Legends
guy? I haven't played it in about 3 years, but yeah, I used to be really into it. I used to play for the university's team, and so it was like a big. Yeah,
they were like best in the country as well one time.
Did you have like a letter jacket and you would beat up the nerds in the hall and be like, yo, there's...
we should have done. Yeah.
I have no context for League of Legends characters. I was going to try to say something and I realized I would just sound stupid. I know almost nothing about League of Legends outside of the context of it being a MOBA and having all of the exposure to MOBA communities online and going, not for me.
Yeah. No, well, I used to do that. I used to do like, so it was, I had about 1,000, I think at the peak it was at like 1,200 subscribers, and it was just a hobby, it was a side thing, so it was fun. But I was getting done with playing League of Legends. Basically, once our team for the university won the National League, and we all graduated, it wasn't as fun to just play the game with friends anymore. It was like I really enjoyed that competitive side, and so that then passed, and so I stopped playing it, and I started trying to move the channel into a more of like a variety YouTube channel, playing different video games. But it just wasn't as fun to me to do anymore. But Lindsey and I did do a couple of videos together with no visual, like video on us. It was just audio and then the gameplay. And that was fun to do.
I've forgotten about that.
But it didn't, it did not, nobody watched it. It wasn't, it didn't translate. The people that were following initially didn't start watching the new stuff.
It's probably still out there somewhere,
It's probably still on my old channel. But yeah, so that passed. I was done. I was like, okay, I'm happy with, it was fun while I was at university and spare time to do. And so I stopped doing that. And, then we started getting really a lot more into board games, and we were both working, so we had a lot of income that we could spend on board games, so our collection grew exponentially within, like, I want to say 2 years or so. And we already had a decent-sized collection anyway. And, yeah, there was April of last year is when I actually made the channel. So we actually registered the YouTube stuff and the email address and everything like that, but then didn't do anything with it for about 6 more months. So it was an idea we had for a long time, and then eventually we both would like, right, let's just do it. Let's just put aside a weekend and just get to work and actually make something that we want to talk about. So
you've mentioned something interesting about when you used to do your YouTube. That was the original gaming solution, because you used to do videos where you'd get inside the mind of the gamer and you'd be like, okay, so how do you prevent yourself from becoming, I don't know the terms anymore. I don't even remember. But do you remember that when you used to do videos and you'd talk about the psychology of it and like how this is, the mindset of, Yeah, you used to do all that, and you used to talk about how to prevent those moments in the game where people start to pull down and they lose, you're losing, and then they get mad and angry.
Yeah, I really like that side of gaming, the psychology behind it. So yeah, that was a big focus of the old YouTube channel, was talking about topics that were psychological, and now we do gaming solutions on our channel, which is usually looking into the mind of somebody, like someone that has AP or somebody that quarterbacks, and just trying to offer solutions to help prevent those situations. It's not as nitty gritty and into the details of what causes it, but yeah, I do like that side of it. And I think that also has impacted the types of games I like as well. The psychological reading people sort of games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think anytime that you can give some sort of thoughtful insight to some of the challenges that people frequently have in the community. I mean, you see on Reddit and Board Game Geek all the time people asking about, how do I deal with someone who has AP in my group? How do I deal with someone who's overly aggressive in my group, or someone who just doesn't care about the game when they're at the table and, is just doing things because it's funny in the moment instead of actually trying to win.
Oh, yeah, that's the worst.
I like to imagine that I'm always focused on trying to have fun, but usually I try to have fun by actively engaging in the game the way that they intend for me to engage with it.
Well, that was actually a big inspiration for Gaming Solutions. It was those posts that we'd see on Reddit and Board Game Geek, people asking for advice with, I still want to play with this person, but they always do this thing, and how do I play games with them still and get the same experiences that I want?
And we'd have
without
a lot of
wanting
experience.
to drive an ice pick into their skull.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and we'd had a lot of experience, gaming with different types of people, younger crowds, older crowds, and making it work.
Yeah, we have experienced like the whole array of different gamers that you can play games with, from going to the game store, playing with people at university, and just even trying to get like new friends from when we worked in the insurance business together. And we've introduced new people to the hobby, and you get a lot of people that have never experienced it before, and so they have these preconceived ideas, or they just have these habits that they aren't aware are viewed as a little bit more negatively. And so it was kind of this experience, and then also seeing that there was kind of a little bit of a need for people that wanted to know how to deal with those situations.
Yeah. Which of you teaches board games?
Me. Yeah.
I'm not very good at explaining things.
It's always me. Yeah, I'm always the one that learns the rules, have to explain it to everyone, the one that always has to look up when something they're like, oh, how does this interact with this? I'm always the one that has to, even though they've got phones and they could Google it themselves, they always ask me, and I go, I don't know, I'll Google it for you, figure it out. I don't mind. I actually really enjoy, because for me, I don't know if it's a control thing. I don't know how deep we're going to get with this, but I like, if I know the rules and I teach it to other people, there's two things. Firstly, I'm pretty confident, and so I know most of the time I'm going to get stuff right, and I don't have to worry about stuff being wrong. Like, we've recently been playing Charterstone, and it's my brother's copy of the game, and he taught us the game, got most of the rules wrong. We actually played the first few scenarios of Charterstone without unlocking anything.
We thought, wow, this is moving slow.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of the whole aesthetic of that game. That thing is supposed to be like frenetic and just,
we know that now.
Very quick.
And so, so I like knowing that if I've read the rules, I know I do a good job, and I know that because we play so many games, sometimes there'll be ambiguous rules that you just have to go, okay, based on how games typically are played, this is probably what that means. And so I feel like I've got the experience, and I'm confident, and I care enough to learn as much as possible. And then secondly, if I do make a mistake, it's then on me, and someone else doesn't feel bad that they taught people the game incorrectly. Like, my brother felt really bad about getting Charterstone rules wrong. And so I don't care if I feel bad, but if other people feel bad, I don't like that. So I like being able to take the blame.
I think
like that.
We're in Jack's silverware drawer again right now. So this is this is like you with the rules. Like, I'll try and explain the rules, and here's Chris coming in sweeping up the mess.
That's funny, because just last Wednesday, which was our regular game night where friends come over, and we have the most amazing group of friends that totally tolerate and in fact love our completely unruly toddler who's running around while we have dinner. And then one of us, my wife or myself, will go upstairs and put our son to bed, and then we'll play games afterwards. And usually we're playing games that we've all played before, and for whatever reason, the group that was at our house and the game that we were going to play was Abyss, and only my wife and I had played it. And we've played it a ton. We're both, I would say, neck and neck as far as being good at the game. But it was like, okay, well, I'll go ahead and put Sarah into bed. And, hon, if you want to teach it, go for it. Or you can wait for me. And she's like, no, babe, I got this. And so I go upstairs and then I come back down, and the table is just scattered with Abyss stuff everywhere. And it's been like 25 minutes, and she's like, I don't know why I'm having such a hard time explaining a game where you can do like 3 things, but trying to explain your least powerful card from your hand is going to then be attached to the lord that you buy, then at the end of the game the most powerful of each color, yada yada yada. It's just it was a mess, and she's like, please clean this up, please do something with it. And as far as teaching it, I think personally for me, it's in spite of my rambling nature that I often have on this podcast, I think that I'm naturally someone who likes to teach things and likes to show things. I usually try to find myself in mentorship type roles, and I've worked with kids a lot in my life, and I've kind of been strangely thrust into a lot of leadership positions at work and that kind of thing. And so being able to contextualize information in a way that makes sure that people understand before we move on to the next thing and make people comfortable with what they're learning is kind of my shtick, I guess. I want people to be feeling good when they're around me, and most often that's making sure that they kind of know what they're doing and feel confident in it. So I think that's why the teaching usually falls on me. But then again, it could also be because I'm just the uber nerd who like cracks open a game and just looks at the rules and is like, yes, this is the best thing ever. I get to read 25 pages of rules. It reminds me of getting like Ocarina of Time. And before I can even play the game, I have the rule book in the box that I can read on my way home.
Yeah, exactly the same for me. Yeah, I used to do the same thing. All the old manuals, just go through them front to back before I play the game. And I think you're right, like you said, the taking on those roles and being like the leadership. So I think that is very much what has happened to me throughout a lot of like university. I was always the team leader for our team projects, and any game group that we had, I was always the one that had to lead the learning and teaching of everything. And it's interesting, you mentioned your wife will explain a game that she has played countless number of times, but for whatever reason she just can't find the words. That same thing happens to Lindsey, especially when we're recording. Lindsey will just have to give a brief overview of a game. For whatever reason, the words escape her, and she just says strange things, bows funnily, like she just starts sort of curtsying the camera and hand gestures all over the place, and she just can't find the words. And so a lot of our bloopers typically come from Lindsey trying to explain things, and yeah, it just falls apart.
I've become some sort of like cartoon character, and I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. Like slipping on bananas, I don't know.
Yeah, but the difference is that you guys can just like give like a knowing look to one another, and you can just keep it going if you wanted, and it's just hilarious and fun. And if nothing else, it kind of alleviates the tension of the moment. I know that when I'm recording something, sometimes I will say the same dumb thing over and over and over and over and re-record and re-record and re-record, and it just, because I'm doing it myself, I just get more and more frustrated until I'm like, you know what, Hunt for the Ring, I'm done with you. I will visit you again in like 3 days, and we are done. It is 2:00 in the morning. I am so tired of looking at this amazing John Howe artwork. I am going to bed, and I don't even want to smell you for at least 48 hours.
I know that feeling.
Well, yeah, so that I was going to say, we typically, like you said, being the two of us, we can usually play it off, and there's no building frustration because it just becomes funny after a while when there's two people and you're not on your own, left with your own thoughts and your own frustrations.
Yeah.
And so the only time it has happened to us was Kingdom Death Monster. Lindsey, we basically dedicated a Saturday to recording a bunch of videos because we were going away over Christmas. And so we had a lot to do, and it was, I think the last video we were recording was Kingdom Death Monster, and so we were like, right, we're ready, let's just crack this one out, we'll do it, we'll do the editing this week. And Lindsey just kept messing up on these same couple of points, and it would be, sometimes we'd get really far into it and we'd be really happy because we do all of our videos in one take, and so we will, from start to finish, if we mess up, we have to start over again from the very beginning. And that happened over and over for Lindsey. And I remember you were getting really frustrated and you had a headache because we got the blinding lights pointing at us all day, and we've been consciously just going from like 9 o'clock in the morning. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And so it was a long day. And yeah, you were like, I was like, do you want to be done? We can record this tomorrow. Before we go visit my parents, we can just get it done in the morning. You were like, no, let's do it. We're going to do it now.
Yeah, it was a challenge at that point. It's like, no, it's a matter of principle. I must get this done.
I will master you, Kingdom Death Monster.
And it worked out. That actually, we were super proud of the end product for that one, especially. Especially knowing the journey we'd been through to get to the video being completed. So it was, I look back on that very fondly now, that video.
Do you?
Only 50% of Behind the Box agrees on that one. But
hey, as far as I'm concerned, that's a 50% ringing endorsement. How did you guys decide on what video to do first? Like, what was the process there?
Ooh, I think that was probably a long discussion. What did we end up doing first? We ended up doing the games for new groups, wasn't it?
So do you mean the first ever video we ever did, how did we decide what that would be?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was the one, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. The first one we did was games for... Because, initially, the first idea for the channel was it was going to be focused very, very heavily on new people coming into the scene. They're just going to YouTube good board games for new people. And so that was kind of the thought, was what's the first thing people are going to look for? They'll try and find out what are good introductory games.
Yeah.
So that was why we did that as our first video.
Yeah, we thought of it as a journey that we're taking with the viewers.
Yeah, we still try and talk when we do our videos. We still try and put that focus on like new groups, and if you sometimes we'll do a parallel. So if you're experienced with this type of game, so with the Spirit Island review, we talked about Pandemic and then discussed how Spirit Island is sort of like an evolution on Pandemic. It has a lot of the same sorts of mechanics, just slightly tweaked, and it's a lot of the same abilities and information, but more difficult. So it was, it was a focus, but then also something we just wanted to do that was a little bit more focused on more experienced people and gamers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that I could be talking about all the video editing and everything and your progression as YouTubers, but you were the ones who actually turned me on to Spirit Island, and I just got it this last week, and I'm obsessed with it at the moment. So I'm going to take a moment to talk about Spirit Island. And I've played it twice with Christina. I played it twice solo. I got wrecked both times solo. The first time she and I played it together, we got half the rules wrong because there's quite a few rules involved with it. And yet I keep staring at that box and I'm like, oh my God, all I want to do is play more Spirit Island. This is awesome. And I think it combines two of my favorite, I guess, concepts in games. One is cooperative games. I really like the idea of cooperative games, but too often I feel like you're sacrificing a lot of the gaminess of it, and I don't really love when games are just creating some sort of artificial tension that feels like very obvious what the next move to make is going to be, and I don't like games that necessarily, I guess, simulate what an opponent would be doing either. And in this game, in a lot of ways, it feels like a cooperative game that wants to be something with as many systems and cool, awesome stuff as something like terraforming Mars. So it has this grand scope of just all kinds of machines just operating at the same time, just interweaving with each other, but it is still accessible. It's very easy to understand once you are within the machine how it's starting to work. And then the coolest thing about it to me, I don't know if this is your guys' experience, because I've only won once, and it was our second game with her and I playing together, but I think the exact line, which I even wrote down, and I was like, this needs to be in the review, is, wow, this game gets really exciting when you're doing kind of okay. and what we found is that unlike a game like, say, Pandemic, where it's like, it's mostly good, oh, it's starting to get bad, oh my god, things are falling apart, it is absolutely terrible. The trajectory of the game that we ended up winning, and I could see how it could be a similar trajectory on other games that you're winning as Spirit Island, is that you are, I guess, doing really bad to start with. Like, everything is awful within like 2 turns, and as soon as you get your foothold and you can start pushing people out towards the shore, the feeling changes, and there's a feeling of empowerment as you go along. Not to say that the threat is done, but you start feeling like, I actually have tools that I can deal with this now, either through more influence or more energy or more cards, or just by nature of pushing the threat further away. And so few cooperative games have that sense of empowerment, which is the thing I love most about board games, is feeling like you are actually interacting with the world and becoming better as the game goes along.
Wow, that was really well put.
Yeah, that is the perfect way to describe Spirit Island. Like I said, like when you start
Look out for the Cardboard Herald's review upcoming.
I can't wait to watch it. Yeah, that's a really, really well put description, because yeah, when you start the game, you're at your weakest. You know, you've got your lowest amount of energy, the lowest amount of cards you can do, and the lowest amount of presence on the board. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you get stronger. And I always love the point in Spirit Island when you're finally able to stop just reacting to what is going to happen this turn, but you can start planning ahead and going, right, next turn, they're only going to try and build there. So let's destroy them before they even build. It's ignoring the ravaging stuff. Yeah, that's such a good... I mean, I'd never even thought of it that way, but that's it is an empowering game. It's not like Pandemic where stuff gets worse and worse and you start out at your strongest and then become weaker and weaker. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic.
You feel like you're like picking up momentum. You're like, yeah, we can do this.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what's on the horizon for Behind the Box? Like, what are your guys' goals for 2018? Are you going to just focus on growing the YouTube channel and doing more of the same, or do you have specific ideas and goals that you're going to branch out either in new concepts or videos, or you got the Behind the Box podcast coming around the corner? You know, what is the future for you guys?
Well, we do have a podcast in mind. And we attempted to record one episode, and it went okay, but I wasn't very happy with it. You know, very typical. But yeah, so we have the podcast that we'd like to do. One day that will be perfect enough to release. Yeah. And then we want to get more involved with the community. So we are planning on going to some conventions, yeah. So there's AirCon in March that we're going to go to, and then was it June?
Yeah, so the start of June, we're doing the UK Games Expo.
Yep.
And we'll be meeting up with the webcomic Semi-Co-op. I don't know if you're familiar with them. And
yeah, totally.
Another webcomic, another one called Up to 4 Players. I'm not sure, again, if you're familiar with them, but they do like an RPG webcomic where the main guy, the GM, I think it's his own system that he's made called Crystal Hearts, where it's like a fantasy land where everyone's heart is like a crystal that gives them superpowers. And he's actually going to be running a game for the two of us and Semi-Co-op. So we'll be doing a really cool RPG thing there. So that's just a nice networking thing, just a way to get to know these people a little bit better.
And, are you guys going to be recording?
Yeah, we also want to do other... I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know. We should talk to them about
I don't
that.
know what the etiquette is for that.
Yeah, I don't know what they want to do. Because I know that he's booked out space at UK Games Expo to actually run the RPG.
Mm-hmm.
So
that would be so cool.
That would be very cool. I will get back to you on that one.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people who are doing live play RPGs on podcasts, just audio form. There's people who are recording video, or a cool way of doing it is just saying, hey, do you mind if I just record a little bit of video and then I put it together in like a 2-minute trailer type of thing that is just a compilation of little clips here. If everyone's comfortable with it. I mean, the main focus is, getting together with other people, having fun, playing games. But, all of you are somewhat involved in various aspects of this community, and it could be a way to help each of you promote each of your respective creative endeavors.
Yeah, I will bring it up with them. I'll message them on Twitter and see if we can come to some sort of...
If you don't have a platform, I'll always make it an episode of the Cardboard Herald.
Hey! And then you can pick the theme music for it. It'll be like Rook and Record.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll just find the perfect soundtrack for that. That's interesting. Cool. I didn't think to bring that up, but thank you guys, because you two have actually been two of the people who have actually put in requests for Rook and Record episodes. I think that's the reason why I ended up doing Mysterium in the middle of the woods here. I was like, oh, these guys are from England, so I'm going to go to the prettiest place that I can think of locally that's within a bike ride of me and start recording there.
Yeah. Oh, that was a fantastic episode. We honestly, Rook and Record,
watched them.
It's one of the most unique series in this, in the content creation industry that we're all in. It's so fun.
I really liked the one that you did. Was it Hunt for the Ring that he did? Yeah, I really liked that one. Where you were in the woods, and of course the obvious choice is going to be the theme music to Lord of the Ring, obviously. But you don't do the obvious choice. And we ended up with, was it Led Zeppelin?
Yeah, well, there's so much more lore and connections. My first love was fantasy, and then my second love was rock and roll. And I love lore in rock and roll. I love history, and I could go for hours talking about each of these records and each of these artists. And I had so much extra footage where I was like, and to further cement the connection, Robert Plant's dog during the primary era of Led Zeppelin was named Strider because he was such a Tolkien fan himself. And I just had all these things I wanted to just talk about, and then I was like, I need to condense this down to 3 or 4 minutes at most.
That would have been so cool, an extended Rook and Record where we can really get behind it. I do have a question.
Yeah.
So I know how important the Red Hot Chili Pepper Californication album was for you, for your music blossoming, will we say? The taste in music. Have you ever found a board game that you think fits that?
Oh, man, that is a great question. I think there are a couple candidates, but the tone of that album, it's a very lonely album, and it's very desolate. And so it has a longing to it that I haven't perfectly found the board game for it, but there are some that have hints of that. Because the Red Hot Chili Peppers, for the most part, they're very playful. They're often silly, especially during certain eras, and they tend to be very knowing in that silliness. But the album Californication, in particular, with songs like Californication, Other Side, Scar Tissue, they are just these wide open landscapes in my mind that are reminiscent of more movie settings than anything else. So I don't know, maybe Forbidden Desert, that might be the one that I would go to. I don't know. I'll have to think about that one some more. That's a great question. And I'm a little weirded out that someone on the other side of the planet is like, I know that Californication is a very special album to you. And I'm like, oh my God, people know things about me, which I'm flattered. I'm flattered.
Well, that's one of those things, like, the more passionate you are, like, the more connection you have to something, like, if something's very nostalgic to you or something really, a big foundation to something else in your life, it's really hard to then, like, with Broken Record, I imagine that Californication would be so hard to put to a board game because nothing's good enough or nothing's quite right because it's so important. You know what I mean?
But then again, I think oftentimes I try to make sacrifices in what is necessarily perfect for me and try to think about what is interesting for an audience. So, like, these are albums that I do really enjoy that I want to listen to while I'm playing these games. But oftentimes the reason that I will explain that it's the perfect album for a game is something that could much easier be understood by someone who doesn't have the deeper personal connection that I do. And so there's things like, or maybe not necessarily deeper connection, but also deeper knowledge of something that doesn't matter as much to the layman who's just getting into things. So, like, Galaxy Trucker is an upcoming Rookin' record, and I'm going to spoil it here because this will probably go up after the Galaxy Trucker Rookin' record does. But I picked this band Little Feat. Lowell George, the artist who is the main musician and songwriter in Little Feat, he had a very fascinating life. But one of the things that happened to him is he cut open his hand playing with RC airplanes, like, you know, model airplanes that actually fly and that kind of thing. And he cut open his hand and injured it, which was a big part of the reason that he ended up focusing on slide guitar playing. And knowing a lot about who this guy is and the things that he enjoyed in life, I think he would have really liked the idea of assembling these ships that are just blasted off into space and then just chaos happens to them. So in a way, the album was almost in honor of him rather than the musical qualities that would best suit Galaxy Trucker. But at the same time, the music itself, I can find ways in order to convince the world that, yes, this is the album to listen to while playing Galaxy Trucker. We'll let the world decide, but...
secret revealed.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of things I'm thinking about in that. And honestly, I just like talking about stupid stuff like rock and roll and board games and waxing poetically about all of this. And if there's a platform for it, then... I guess I'll share it there. I guess it's doing good enough, so you guys are at least enjoying it. So I'm happy.
Oh gosh, yeah.
It's even just the way you've just described everything from the Californication through to the Galaxy Trucker. It's so impressive, just that thought process and the knowledge behind it that influences then, you know, how you choose the albums you choose and the explanations you give. We listen to them and we go, yeah, that's spot on.
Why didn't we think of
everything you've just said is perfect for the way you've explained it. And a lot of the albums that you've suggested as well, we've not known, and so we'll go listen to them afterwards. Like the first one, Mystic Vale and Jethro Tull.
Yeah, I was blown away when you guys were like, we had no idea who Jethro Tull was. I was thrilled I converted someone else to it.
Well, that was what was crazy. Actually, I maybe had, like, at some point in my life had heard of them or heard a song, but it was not something I was familiar with. And we listened to it, and we're familiar. We've not played Mystic Vale, but we're familiar with the gameplay and the themings. And as I was listening to it, I was like, yeah, I could absolutely play a game that's that theme with this music. Yeah. It was spot on. Everything was just, it was nailed it, basically.
It may also be like the BSing salesman in me that wants the challenge. How can I connect these two things and actually convince people that there's a reason they belong together?
I should have mentioned I'm extremely gullible. So
there we go. Hey, by the way, I have a used car that you might be interested in. Let me tell you about it. So I love talking with you guys. I feel like we really need to get together sometime, and there's going to be a convention, there's going to be an opportunity. I'm going to visit the UK, or you guys are going to somehow work your way over to Alaska, and we're going to get some time to the table, and I'm really looking forward to that. So I think a good way to kind of wrap this up is, so that I know what game we're going to play, what are each of your like personal favorite games? Like in your heart of hearts, not the most impressive game or anything, but like your comfort food of gaming.
Oh boy.
Do you have an answer in mind?
Yes. It's Codenames.
It's a great pick.
Yeah, I just love games that get you communicating in a different way. I think that's my ice cream game.
And that's like the ultimate evolution of the games that you were playing as a kid with your family. I mean, Codenames has more in common with Balderdash than it does with Spirit Island, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Yeah. Yeah. For me, my favorite game of all time is Sentinels of the Multiverse.
Okay. Yeah.
But if you're not a fan of that, we can do Spirit Island, because that's number 2, number 3. Yeah. So I love cooperative games where you got to work together, and it's like an actual challenge to work together. Generally, my jam.
What about you, Jack?
Oh man, I think if we were going to go for like in my heart of hearts, just the game that brings me joy every time that I bring it out. God, there's so many games. God.
I was expecting you to say Terraforming Mars.
I thought he was going to say Hero Quest.
Terraforming Mars or Archipelago would probably be the two that I break out as like, these are the ones that just bring me constant joy. And Archipelago is a weird one because there's all kinds of things in that conceptually and like ethically do not bring me joy. There's some challenging stuff in Archipelago to go like, am I having fun with something with this iconography in it? But what I think is really unique about Archipelago is that, unlike a lot of other colonial board games that have really questionable material and choices that are, let's say, painting with broad strokes onto a lot of very nuanced things, Archipelago tries to say something about it. Like it tries to say that exploiting the population here will ultimately end up in revolution. It's a very ham-fisted approach, and it often swings for the fences and has very good intentions and gets things completely wrong, making a fool of itself in trying to deal with these very complex and nuanced issues. But I think it's fascinating that there's at least some sort of morality mechanism within the game that has actual in-game effects without necessarily trying to tell you that the only win condition is by being moral. And that, combined with the beauty of the game and the sense of exploration in it, and just the completely bananas game end condition. I don't know if you guys have played it, but it triggers a game end based off of hidden information in everyone's hand. Everyone has their own unique thing that will trigger that game ending. It's a mess of a game, but I really, really like it because it has so many concepts trying to interact in interesting ways. The ultimate realization of something that has really fascinating concepts and often has kind of a nuanced approach or comment on colonialism without necessarily having to deal with the oppression of native inhabitants is Terraforming Mars. It's this big sweeping game that feels like an exploration because you're actually exploring how you can uplift this planet and then reap the economic rewards of that. So I have a kind of a weird relationship to that. It's like this beautiful, noble thing that we're going to terraform Mars, the apex of human ingenuity, and then I'm going to take as much of it for myself as possible. But I like these big, broad games that use a few simple mechanics in order to really empower you by scope. And I think Spirit Island is going to be in that same vein here soon, too. So I would probably say that either Terraforming Mars or Archipelago are like the games that I would go to. But this whole long-winded explanation, now that I'm thinking about it, is going to probably end up in me saying, you know what, let's just play some Kingdom Builder. Let's just play like 3 or 4 games of Kingdom Builder.
I was going to suggest we get Archipelago to the table, but then your wife has to teach it.
Okay, that would be amazing, and I can't wait to spend 4 hours getting ready for playing Archipelago together. I'll be making food while this goes on, so we'll at least have something to occupy us.
That sounds good. Well, that's lovely.
I feel like I've taken up so much of your guys' time because there's so much more that I want to learn about, and so I hope that I can get the commitment, the promise out of you guys that you will come back onto the Cardboard Herald, because this has been absolutely fantastic.
Oh, wait. Yeah, absolutely. Why did I just say wait? I feel...
Wait, hold on. Let me check my book here. I'm a very busy gal. I got a lot going on. I don't know about Chris. He's kind of a loser and doesn't have things going on, so maybe he can come back on your lame show. But me, I got other things to do.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I say really, really weird things when I get excited.
I'm just grilling you.
I never thought I would get an invitation to another Cardboard Herald. Clearly, I don't know how to react properly.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, this has been so much fun. This is the sort of stuff we want to do this year, getting to know other creators and collaborating or going on other podcasts or having people on our podcast if we ever do that.
Well, I hope you guys do. I hope you do, and I'd be happy to promote it as much as possible, because as far as I'm concerned, and I've had other people be like, I really like your podcast, Jack, and I kind of wanted to start a podcast, but I don't want to be eating a piece of that pie. And I'm like, as many voices as can be out there, the people will determine what they want to listen to. And the good news is that people can listen to 2 or 3 or 10 or 100 podcasts. It's up to them. And, the more voices out there, then I think the more solid this hobby is going to be.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, the more the merrier.
So yeah, we'll definitely be back on, and hopefully there won't be huge delays with us moving and then having no internet and then going to America, and it'll be a much smoother experience for everyone involved. And hopefully our internet will be sorted out by then as well, so you can actually see us.
Totally. All right. Well, thank you guys so much, Chris and Lindsey, for coming on to the Cardboard Herald. Everyone should check out Behind the Box. You guys are on Twitter at BehindTheBoxYT, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then do you guys actually have a website now, or it's just all YouTube?
At the moment, yeah, just all YouTube. We've got a Facebook page that's mainly just like a link dump place, and then an Instagram where if we're playing a game, we throw pictures up on Instagram as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I got to get on that Instagram tip. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much. See ya.
See you later.
As always, the Cardboard Herald is a completely free service providing you with interviews, reviews, and recommendations. You can find all of our stuff at cardboardherald.com or check out all of our regular content on our YouTube channel. If you are interested in contributing, have some feedback, or just want your listener mail read on air, click the contact link on our site. If you enjoyed this episode on our interview feed, check out our sister podcast, TCbH Reviews, where we give you audio versions of our reviews, followed by a look behind the scenes of what went into making them. Lastly, this episode was edited and produced by Rob Conley of Ginger Cat Productions. Have a new audio project you need help with? Whether it's music or podcasting, Ginger Cat Productions can help you out. Find them at gcatproductions.com. Once again, thank you for listening. I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald, and you keep on gaming.